Buenas tardes a todos. Buenos días, buenas noches.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hola, hola.
Welcome to Latinx YC, where we discuss all things related to U.S. politics from a Latino, Latina, and Latinx perspective. My name is Clemencia Herrera, and I am the founder of Moira Studio, an advertising agency that works on political and advocacy campaigns that target Latinx.
And I am Cecilia del Cid, environmental and social justice practitioner, Latin American, immigrant from Guatemala, community weaver, and working on media as well.
Hi, hello.
Hola, mi amor, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien.
Tell me.
I just noticed as we were about to record that this is episode 20.
Yeah.
Yay!
Look at it.
Little did I know, my little Latina brain back in, the beginning of 2021 think that we'll be here and that people will be listening. I mean, I thought we would have like 0 people listening. And we actually have people listening. So I'm very proud of what we've done so far. Thank you, Ceci, for coming into this journey, because it has been a journey. I also feel, and you guys please tell me out there, I feel like I've improved on my speaking skills.
We both have improved. We're getting better. We're getting better.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes we finish, we're like, that felt really good. And
it felt good.
I didn't feel like I was stuttering the whole time.
We have improved. We have grown. We've grown and sharpened our way of thinking, expanded our imagination, and we've gotten better at doing it too in the process.
I agree. And we've also, this episode has grown so much too. We started from just talking about the things that were bothering us, and then it has grown so much. Like, I now have conversations with people, and I'm like, this should go on the podcast. I now read articles, this should go on the podcast. And, it's just like the topics just keep coming and coming and coming.
Yes.
And we've had some amazing guests, and I'm hoping to have really many more really amazing guests. And thanks for being here with us, people.
Thank you very much to our listeners, to the people who give us feedback, to the ones who appreciate what we say, the ones that hold us responsible and accountable. We appreciate you all. It's been an incredible journey. Thank you for inviting me to this adventure. It's been a beautiful one. So thank you.
I know. Thank you. All right. So that was a nice little quick celebration. Yeah. We can celebrate together at some other.
We will.
Offline.
So tell me, what were you reading this time that sparked the way that we're gonna discuss today?
This is gonna be a very interesting and maybe controversial episode. This episode we're going to talk about, this thing that could be a little taboo among our community, which is colorism. And I was actually reading an article the other day in which it was saying that for some reason, and we'll go into these reasons now. It did a good job at analyzing it, but we're gonna go deeper. That why is it that all the racial unrest that has been going on in the U.S. for the past few years, such as Black Lives Matter, the immigration crisis at the border, the kids in the cages, all these things, and also the rhetoric that the certain organizations have had about Trump saying that he's a white supremacist and that he's against people of color and all that stuff. Why is it that it didn't affect the Latino vote? And actually, Trump gained 16 points across the U.S. with Latinos. which is, it's I know that some people are just like baffled. They're just like, oh, Latinos against Trump is like, this against that and all that stuff. And it on the surface it feels like, why, but so we're gonna take a deep dive into why we think it's why.
Yeah. So I think important to just we're saying that 16 points between the 2016 election and the 2020 election, and I still think Latinos came out and voted in big numbers, and obviously our vote skews in different direction. But what we're wondering is, like, after all these attacks, all these rhetorics, and I think that some of the things you and I have discussed when we were kind of like pondering these questions were like, how much of it is because that rhetoric or that way of speaking kind of like align with some of the values of some of the members of our community. So there is, but I think at different levels, right? So there's people who lean into like misogynistic or and patriarchal kind of way of thinking. When we think by gender, like men have the many things. There is things, the previous president said that I always thought, like, why would any woman vote for him? And I think there were things that he said also racially. Then said, why would any person, any black person or any person of color, any immigrant vote for him? So like, I'm thinking always about like systems of oppression, and this is also another point we kind of made, is like in the English kind of conversations or lingo, hearing about white supremacy is becoming more normal, but we don't hear it that much in our Spanish or Latinx communities, Spanish speakers. So like, it's my thought that people who vote against their interests from any group, from any kind of social identity, vote against their interests, what is perceived their best interest, do it because they are either benefit from the system in some level, or they're aspiring to be closer in proximity to power. And I don't know if that makes sense. Tell me if that makes sense.
Yes, and I mean, like, that's exactly the hot button right there. And it's funny that you mentioned it, because this also came from our last conversation with Karina from La Casita, in which she mentioned white supremacy a lot. But she is seeing it from, an expert, first of all. So obviously experts can see it. And she's also seeing it from like outside the matrix. You know what I mean? Like bird's eye view outside the matrix of, assimilation, outside the sunglasses of being embedded into the system that we can't see. It's kind of like, I can't remember the phrase, but you can't see it when you're. It's like
we're fish and the system is the water. It's everywhere.
Right. That's it. The fish can't see the water. It's like that's what they so
it's there. Yeah.
So
the system is the water.
Why do you think that Latinx don't really talk about white supremacy?
I think that there is multiple reasons, and we should like kind of think of like, there's the people who have like definitely been born in this country and are multi-generationally in this country, and the United States has a very, very difficult and painful it's built on a stolen land, unceded land of Native people by stolen people from another country that were enslaved. So that's how the United States was built, and the whole of the continent has been, taken, conquered, colonized on this, on stolen land, on unceded land by Native people. So I would say that so they have the history that Latinos, Latinx experience when we live in the United States, and we have the histories that have also happened in our countries. So there is a big range of how race is constructed along all those territories. But I think overall, we have a deep-rooted anti-blackness, anti-negrura, and anti-indigeneity, like anti-indigenidad. And those are things that I was introduced to fairly recently in my kind of like lived experience, probably a couple of years ago. I never thought how much we raise the black people in our countries in Latin America, or the indigenous people in our countries in Latin America, and how that translate to the lived experiences of our communities in the United States, on top, layered by the history of racism and white supremacy of the country as a whole.
Yeah, and you raised a great point, and I definitely think that this is inherited, right? As mestizos, we have inherited the racism from the colonists, right? And that was also anti-black, anti-indigenous.
Yes.
But we have sort of like taken that upon ourselves, and like we have not separated ourselves from the colonists. We have actually been like, well, we're part of this, so because like at the end of the day in our countries, there's lots of racism.
There is.
Like in Latin America, there's a lots of racism. You know,
When
the black Latin Americans still are the people that clean, the people that look after the children. The indigenous people are just basically nobodies. You know, they have no rights. They take their lands whenever they want, or you know, the indigenous people are protesting and nobody really cares. The word indio is a word that's
It's supposed to be an insult.
Yeah, it's synonym with just an ignorant person or a violent person. You know, when somebody's being violent, they call them an indio. Stop being such an indio. So it's so have we just like come here and then like seen ourselves as white Americans? Is that what we're trying to do?
Well, I think that this is once again goes back to like the conflation of race and ethnicity, but like Latin American people and Latinx people, Latinos or Spanish speaker people can be of any race, right? We have people who are of like in Brazil, for example, has like Nipo Brasileiros. It's like the largest diasporic group outside of Japan. So like people from Japan in Latin America. So that makes them Asian Americans too. They call themselves Nipo Brasileiros because it's a very and kind of like regional. But if they came here, that's an Asian American. Probably very different conception of identity than an Asian American who is being here.
Correct.
So then we have people from, I know there's people from Asia. I'm going to talk about Guatemala. I've seen people in Guatemala that are the Korean descent, from Jordanian descent, so Middle East, from
there's
Africa.
There's many Middle Eastern people.
Yes, Middle Eastern. So like we can be of any kind of like, we can be black, we can be Asian, we can be native, we can be, and then there's all these mixtures. And I remember a long time ago, nerding out a little bit, like studying Latin American history, there used to be paintings in the Spanish called las pinturas de las castas. And if you were an Indio with a black, you would be this. And if you were a 2/3 white plus a black, or like then you would become this. And there was like whole organizing of how you fall in categories. So like we have always been in the Spanish system and in the U.S. system, caste has been something that is really always trying to put a hierarchy. For example, white Spaniards were able to marry native people in Guatemala if they were part of the royal families of the indigenous groups. But not all native. So like you could marry as a regular Spaniard, you could marry royal, right? But
that hierarchy went out the window.
But those were all those things, right? Like that were the ones who matched the colonizer. Then they had to have in that hierarchy. So hierarchies are very natural. Like I think it's not a natural. It's a something that happens in societies. Definitely, we all have them. But like as we build these hierarchies, when we're talking about colorism, then becomes to emerge this idea of like of shades of brown, and the closer we are to whiteness, the more beautiful you are, the more powerful you are perceived, the more educated you are perceived. Even if we think about, you and I talk about media and talk about like technology a lot as well, and even if you do a search and you ask people like to do a beautiful woman, most of the images will be biased towards whiteness. There is a whole kind of like a effort right now to diversify like technology, but also to let it know that IA is learning these biases, right? Which is like artificial intelligence. All that to say that we're trying always to come closer to whiteness. Why?
Well, according to what you've said and what I've learned from you, is that we're trying to get closer to power, because the power is held by the white person. So
or by the system.
And the system supports the white person the most. So it's like, I know, and we've talked about this before. I know that, back in Colombia, the girls straighten their hair, even though it's curly. They go blonde. And I'm sure this happens a lot in other Latin American countries. And there's this like effort to try to get yourself, or even within like the Latin Afro community, like the ones that have the more fair skin are seen as better. It's like
yes,
and I feel like that exists also within the African American community. But obviously we're talking about specifically the Latinx community. And so we're seeing, I guess we are, because we inherited this white supremacy in our minds, we are relating to, the white race. But then we're here in the United States, and the actual white Americans don't really see us as like that. They're just like, what? You? It just...
No, what?
We are seen as people of color, and like, just like whatever shade that we are, if we are not pale, we are people of color. And so there's there's a disconnect in what others outside of us think and what we think, and at the same time there's this disconnect of like our rights and their rights, because they're just not connecting. I don't know. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, and I think once again, like, so there's many things, right? For example, I will say there is the people who it's just making me think of like something that used to happen for the African American community that we used to call passing, people that look white phenotypically, and that happens with people who are mestizo or multiracial, right? Like, you don't know how you're going to turn out, and eventually, as generations go by, that is a matter of genetics and your eye color, your skin characteristic, your hair characteristics. It's a matter of genes. Like blue eyes are like a gene, actually a recessive gene. It's actually not a dominant gene. I always think like all these things we value are recessive in biology, and I'm like, I wonder what that means. Like, that's a whole conversation.
I remember a friend of mine who was saying that within Latino families, if you marry, a white, blonde, light-eyed person, is like, ooh,
we're gonna
whiten whiten the family.
I don't know if you've heard of this, but like, mejorar la raza, I don't know if you've ever heard that, but that was a big thing, like, growing up. I was like, you don't date, like, I'm dark, and when I am in my natural element in the tropics, I am way darker. Here in the Northeast, when I don't have that much summer hours, I get pale. But like, I remember hearing since I was very small, and you start telling your mom, which other kids you like in the playing ground, and you go like, oh, I like that one. And she's like, you have to mejorar la raza. Está más negrito que tú. And I'm like, you like the kid because the kid is probably the best football. Like, it gave you a cookie in recreo. Like, you know, somewhat, or like whatever. Did something good in the school, and like, you're not thinking those things, but your parents, like our community. So those things are messaging that we hear all the time. Or when the babies are born and they go, ay, qué bonito está, y está bien blanquito. That se me paran los pelos.
I know.
But it happens every day, and we're always trying to. This idea that if I marry, like for people who are from Afro descent, which is, you don't want to marry someone who is gonna have this. It's like, what do you do with ese pelo malo? Like, there is so many words that are negative in our language about people who are darker, people who are Afro descendant, people who are indigenous.
Yeah.
And that eats at you as an individual. It eats at us as a community. It erodes our ability to be with each other and connect.
To be compassionate. Because also, you know, and going back to this article that I read, is like, when, you know, when people watch something about Black Lives Matter, they just go, this has nothing to do with me. Another thing that I think is important to note is that there's so many Latinos that just say, I'm just gonna stay on my lane, and I'm not gonna bother with any of this, you know, stuff, because first of all, it has nothing to do with me, and second, I just don't wanna alborotar el avispero.
And
I don't wanna shake the hornet's nest. And it's very damaging, that way of thinking, because if we are lacking compassion and we're not taking action for others, who is going to take action for us? We are basically just putting ourselves in this silo, in not interacting with other communities, you know, like not seeing yourself as people of color takes you into this whole different realm, because like, people of color are not gonna see you as a person of color. White people are not gonna see you as white people. So then what are you? Okay, fine, all right, we're something else, great. But what are we? Because like, I know that many Latinos, you know, in the census identify themselves as white. And the thing is, I'm not saying that you shouldn't identify as white. What I'm trying to say is that the government and people here, that the system don't identify you as white. So when you're saying that you're Hispanic, you know, because that's the word in the census, and you're white, they're like, they're just Hispanic. You know, they're not gonna say, oh, it's white, it's a white Hispanic or whatever. It's and what this just shows is this dissonance that is going on, and also the lack of options that, you know, the census gave us. And I don't want to talk about that right now, because that's a whole different conversation. But recognizing that there's nothing wrong with our ancestry. There's nothing wrong with our indigenous heritage. There's nothing wrong with our Afro heritage. I mean, I did the 23andMe. Well, my brother did the 23andMe. It's the same thing. I'm just like,
yes,
same thing.
Yes.
And yes, there's a good part of it that is Iberic, you know, from Spain. But there's also a 25% Southeast Asian, which means indigenous.
Yes.
Which is like, because they migrated. You know, and so it's like 25%. That's a lot. That's a lot. I was actually really excited to see that, you know, and so it's like, there's really nothing wrong with really recognizing where we're from. But I understand, you know, people that are disempowered, people that just feel like they need to grasp at, you know, straws to like try to survive, are going to side with where the power is, and
And I think that there is a lot in in your last kind of like some of the points you made, like there is this idea of like if you feel disempowered and you are in this country alone or are new arriving, or there is other, like you don't speak the language or other things that put you in a vulnerable situation, you might want to stay on your lane, right? You don't want to call attention to yourself. You want to make yourself, you came here to work, you came here to produce a better life, not for you sometimes, but for your children, or for the next generation, for your parents.
You're sending
back.
money to your family.
Yeah. So like you are here, una pequeña hormiguita echando punta, working hard. And so I can understand that we are so spent that the system is designed to grind us as immigrants, but every person who is poor or like working class. And then there's also these, how do we identify ourselves within these like social identity labels? And I think a lot of us suddenly feel like I am not. You might have, like, maybe in your country you were just Mr. So-and-so, Don Fulano, Doña Fulana, and now you are like this woman of color immigrant. So those are three identities that put you in a disadvantage right away, right? Like you are not a man, you are not white, and you are not a U.S. citizen. So if those are the ones that described before are the opposite. So like, why would you want to put that burden on you? You're like, that's not me. So I think that's when understanding power and the identities, to just understand that they're tools to help us guide and understand where the power resides and how we can reclaim our power. So when we build solidarity, when we begin to like just say, okay, me voy a poner esta camiseta and I'm gonna go with this team, just doesn't mean that I believe in everything that this team is supposed to be, but it means that I can put my energy, my work behind collective action.
Yeah.
And the system has created a lot of divisions that makes us weak, because if you're isolated in your lane and you think that what is affecting other groups doesn't affect you,
you got another thing.
Whoever has the power keeps having the power.
Yeah. Well, and also they'll come for you eventually.
Yeah. Eventually.
And so that's the thing, like, when the Black Lives Matter movement started, I heard many conversations from Latinos saying, and what about Latino lives?
Yeah.
And I fully agree that they also matter. And also Latinos get killed by police. Not as much as, black people, but it's a pretty sizable number. I will get the data if you guys need any. But then if we actually want the black community to come and support us when we have our Latinos Lives Matter movement, we gotta unite. We gotta also support others. And it's not about, because we are doing exactly what we criticize other people for doing. They have forgotten us. They don't respect us. They treat us like crap or whatever. We're doing the same thing. We can't be doing the same. If we actually want to grow as humanity and we want to live in a better place, we have to treat other people like we want them to treat us. So it's like turning off the television and saying, well, that's their problem. It's not going to get us anywhere.
I think also, so there's a couple of things, right? I think I would say that Black Lives Matter it was something that has been, like, the African American community obviously has been organizing for decades, and it's a social movement. A lot of people, I think there was this idea that in order for a social movement to be valid, it has to be non-violent. And I'm not saying Black Lives Matter is non-violent. I'm just saying that resistance takes many forms, and non-violence is one of them. And other times we have needed to defend ourselves, like, when there has been aggressions. The Native Americans have defended their lands. That's right, like, so I think that some of the criticisms to Black Lives Matter were really anti-black. They showed from our community, showed a lot of anti-blackness feeling and sentiment. That doesn't nullify that sometimes in many times, African American community can be xenophobic or anti-immigrant. But there is an African American person can find themselves being an anti-immigrant too, and an anti-indigenous people as well. We are not all learning and moving at the same pace. However, if we remain divided,
yes.
we are doing again what the powers that be that have created this system bank on what we are doing.
Yeah.
What is radical is to be in solidarity, to see beyond our differences and to recognize in the humanity on each other beyond these labels, and using these tools like anything else that we have in a toolbox. It's not a hammer for everything. Sometimes you have a screwdriver, sometimes you have a alicate,
pliers,
pliers, like I was like that one. So but we have to recognize that these labels have limitations, that they don't define us, but that they can help us organize to get what our communities need in better way, to gain political power. When there was a lot of work. I think I've spoken to this in the past. When I came here and I learned about the civil rights movement for the first time, I was so impressed by how the Chicano movement and the farm workers movement built upon some of the work the civil rights movement had done. So, and MLK actually communicated with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, and they were acting on coalition building. When you think about some of the work of some of Black Panther Party, for example, to gain before it got very controversial. The grassroots was like they collected with the Irish groups, they connected with the Latino groups. They knew if we would only if we really want proximity to power, it's not through colorism. It is through coalition building and political mobilization. And that takes a lot of work because we have to get over all these biases that are very natural for us to live by.
Yeah, and the other thing is that we are trying to reach this power that other people have defined for us. We need to define our own way of power. We need to define what the new world order of power means, because right now power means oppression. Right now power means exclusiveness. Scarcity, that's right. And because we're coming from this place of united we stand, then we are recreating our own definition of power. And that's the thing, we don't need to reach for that power. We have our own mountain to climb, and it's different and it's better, and it's going to take us to a better place.
But also, like, I think that you're absolutely right. Like, that is a very, very important point. And we are so caught up that we haven't been creative. And you know how many times people tell you, like, but that's how things are, or like, you can't do that.
It is. Yep.
And everything hasn't always been that way, and it used to be different, and then someone else came and was able to move the needle in one or the other direction. And the idea is that we can dream a better future politically, environmentally, socially, that has enough for all of us to live a dignified life,
right,
and to thrive.
Yeah. So with that, it's a lot to unpack, and there's a lot to think about, and maybe, hey, now that I was just thinking about it, it's like, what does that power look like? Let's do another episode about, what is our new definition of power as community. So, we're gonna leave you with this, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. What is your definition of power? What is the new definition that we're going to create for ourselves of power? Please
Yes.
reach back out to us, Clem at latinxycpod.com. We are on Twitter, latinxycpod. We are on Instagram, same handle. We are on TikTok. Just, let us know
Yes.
how you feel. Let us know your thoughts.
And-
You want us to
and if
dive
you
into
listen to
something
the-
completely different?
Yeah, and when you listen to the pod, to the episodes, leave us a review or a
Yes.
rating, because that helps.
And tell your friends. Tell your friends about us. I know that we might just be a little loopy, but hey, I think we're likable.
It's fun.
Oh yeah, and we also, if you're listening to us on audio only podcasts, you can look at our beautiful faces on YouTube, Latinx Pod. Or if you're watching us on YouTube and you're just like annoyed at looking at our faces, like you could just listen to us on the podcast audio,
Yes.
audio only.
Estas morenitas.
We're giving you all the options.
Thank you all very much for accompanying us for 20 episodes.
20 episodes. Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.